Shabbat Shalom and Mazel Tov. I remember, Arielio, when your parents were waiting for your arrival and praying for your safe arrival into this world. And I remember watching you grow at family services every Shabbat you were here before the pandemic. And now here you are with strong voices leading the congregation. We are extremely proud of both of you. 96 years of life, 70 years on the throne. As monarch, Queen Elizabeth II visited some 117 countries. She acted as head of state to 15 British prime ministers. Over the course of her reign, which lasted more than 1/3 of the history of Canada, she visited this Commonwealth country 22 times. And her final official statement as queen was a letter of condolence to the James Smith Cree Nation of Saskatchewan. She wrote, "My thoughts and prayers are with those recovering from injuries and grieving such horrific losses. I mourn with all Canadians at this tragic time." That was her final official statement as queen. What was the relationship between Queen Elizabeth II and the Jewish people? Was she, as we often ask, good for the Jews? In May 1952, just months after the death of her father, King George, the Queen met with the British chief rabbi and leaders of the British Jewish community. And a month later, Jewish officials, as well as the Israeli ambassador, were present at her coronation at Westminster Abbey. Throughout her reign, she inspired loyalty among the Jews of the United Kingdom. She hosted many Jewish and Israeli leaders. She knighted many Jews, but she never visited Israel. And that was always a sting for the Jewish community. No member of the royal family ever visited Israel in an official capacity until 2018, when Prince William made the historic journey. Before that, Prince Philip had made a personal visit to Israel in 1994 to honor his mother, Princess Alice of Greece, who is buried on the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. And Prince Charles, who will soon be named king, visited Israel in 1995 and in 2016 to attend the funerals of Yitzhak Rabin and Shimon Peres of blessed memory. But these were personal trips, not official visits of the monarchy. And in 1996, during a visit to Poland, Queen Elizabeth was criticized for not scheduling a stop at Auschwitz. In a last-minute addition to her itinerary, she laid a wreath at a Jewish memorial in Warsaw, where Jews had been rounded up and transported to Treblinka. In the year 2000, the Queen inaugurated Britain's first permanent memorial to the Holocaust. And finally, on her last official foreign trip before her death, her last trip was to Germany in 2015, and there she did visit a concentration camp. She did lay a wreath at Bergen-Belsen and met with Holocaust survivors and listened to their stories. So despite the Queen's refusal to visit Israel, despite her delay in acknowledging the horrors of the Shoah, Queen Elizabeth enjoyed widespread affection from British Jewry and from many Jews of this country as well. When she turned 90, the former UK Chief Rabbi, Lord Jonathan Sacks, lionized the Queen as someone who, quote, whose greatness speaks across ethnic and religious divides. Her contribution to British society is immeasurable, and the respect she has shown for all religions has enriched our lives. While the royal family was shaken after a British tabloid released video footage of the 7-year-old Elizabeth giving a Nazi salute in 1933 or 1934, British Jewry largely defended the monarch, and swiftly. When the footage was first revealed in 2015, Jonathan Arkush, then president of the Board of Deputies of British Jewry, said, "I don't think any criticism of a 7-year-old child would be remotely appropriate, and I do not intend to make any. I do not think for one moment that it would be appropriate for me to suggest that the full horror of Nazi Germany was known at that point in history." So why do the Jewish people within the Commonwealth and beyond show such widespread admiration for this queen? She was, of course, the head of the Church of England, a devout Christian, the defender of her faith. And in her lifetime, there was so much that resonated with British Jewry. What she brought to her role was an unshakable sense of duty and loyalty, reflected in that vow she made in 1947 to live a life of service. Her vows were those of an earlier England, framed by a Christian ethos in which self mattered less than duty and obligation mattered more than personal ambition. These values, that faith, reminds us of our own. We too are loyal to our faith, which demands religious duty and communal service. Many Jews recognize in this queen a familiar, tireless devotion to working towards something larger than ourselves, making ourselves instruments of the divine for the sake of a greater, even global good. And duty is a word that is so rarely used today. It so rarely is the word people turn to explain their motivation for why we do what we do. Today, instead, we talk about personal growth, we talk about personal passions. We are encouraged to each discover our own unique path in life. But duty must still be a common word in the Jewish vocabulary. Sacred obligation, service, mitzvah, words like I must and I ought to. These are words we Jews use when describing our loftier, more noble deeds. This outlook explains why we come to shul, why we make a shiva call, why we give tzedakah. For us, Judaism is a gift to be handled carefully, to be passed down from generation to generation, lidor vador, as we see today in the Markle family. This sacred calling is our version of the crown. Both royals and Jews hold fast to ancient traditions, in part because we understand how near the world came to losing them altogether. Against the backdrop of Jewish history, such affection and mutual admiration between the Queen and her Jews is remarkable. It must be noted. After a series of massacres and 200 years of brutal anti-Semitism, the Edict of Jewish Expulsion from England was a royal decree issued by King Edward I, July 1290. The expulsion edict remained in force throughout all of the Middle Ages. The edict was eventually overturned more than 350 years later, during the Protectorate, when Oliver Cromwell permitted Jews to return to settle in England in the year 1657. So by comparison, yes, there is no doubt Queen Elizabeth II was good for the Jews. This week, Rabbi Ephraim Mervis, the United Kingdom's current chief rabbi, said Queen Elizabeth cherished the Jewish communities in the countries over which she reigned. We recall with much appreciation the warm relationship she had with the Jewish community, with a particular commitment to interfaith relations and Holocaust memorial. I recall the rabbi says how on one occasion she showed me and my wife items of Jewish interest and value from her personal collection in Windsor Castle, including a Torah scroll rescued from Czechoslovakia during the Holocaust. Her affection for the Jewish people ran deep, Rabbi Mervis claims, and her respect for our values was palpable. And even from Israel, which was never able to welcome her, this week Israeli President Isaac Herzog called her death the end of an era. Throughout her long and momentous reign, he stated, the world changed dramatically, while the Queen remained an icon of stable, responsible leadership and a beacon of morality, humanity, and patriotism. In her life and in her service to her people, the Queen embodied a spirit of integrity, duty, and ancient tradition. Now, I imagine within this sanctuary today there are a range of opinions and emotions regarding the monarchy in general and this queen in particular. And I can tell you that when I became a citizen of Canada, as an American, it felt a little strange to affirm that I would, quote, be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Canada, her heirs and her successors. Just moments ago, we offered a prayer for our country and its leaders. There was no mention of Queen, but there was a time when Holy Blossom Temple, founded by British Jewry in 1856, when for many decades we would include in every Shabbat service a prayer for king and country, and God save the Queen. The range of attachment and affection on the one hand, and distrust and even disdain for the throne, is a perfect reflection of the Hebrew Bible's love-hate relationship with monarchy altogether. From the very beginning, the ancient Israelites were both infatuated with and loathing of kings. In last week's Torah portion we read, if after you enter the land that your God has assigned to you, and take possession of it and settle in it, should you decide, I will set a king over me, as do all the other nations which surround me, then you shall be free to do so, to set a king over yourself, one chosen by your God. But be sure to set a king over yourself, one of your own people. You must not set a foreigner over you, not one who is unlike your kinsmen. Moreover, that king shall not keep many horses, and shall not send people back to Egypt in order to acquire additional horses for him, since God has warned you, you shall never go back that way again. And your king shall not have many wives, lest his heart go astray. And your king shall not amass silver and gold to excess. When he is seated on his throne, he shall always have by his side a copy of the Torah, written for him on a scroll by the Levitical priests. Let that Torah remain with your king, and let him read from it all the days of his life, so that he may learn to revere his God, to observe faithfully every word of this Torah, as well as the laws it contains. Thus your king will not act haughtily toward his fellows, or deviate from the Torah to the right or to the left, to the end that he and his descendants may reign long in the midst of Israel. And so you can hear, even in these few verses, there is skepticism about human rulers. Ancient Israel had no less than 42 kings, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so, after the biblical period was closed, the rabbis give great warning, saying, let your queen be the Shabbat queen, and let your king only be the Melech Malchei Hamlachim, the ruler of all human rulers, the one above and beyond any leader of flesh and blood. In just a moment, we're going to stand to our feet for the Aleinu. And there it is written that we place our hope in you, Adonai our God, Soon may we behold the glory of your power. As it is written in your Torah, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed, the eternal God will reign forever and ever. This is the theme we take up on Rosh Hashanah when, like trumpets, we hear the shofar blasts, announcing the arrival of the Melech Malchei Hamlachim, who rules over us, who rules over the entire universe, and God willing will grant us another good year of life. Amen.